From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. Andrew with you once again, joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D43. Derek, there are many ways of representing basketball through video games. Some are sim, some are less serious, some are a little loony. Cartoony isn't always a bad thing, as we're discussing this week, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, on today's show, we will be reviewing Looney Tunes Wacky World of Sports, which is released on September 27th, 2024, on Steam, Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series consoles. Andrew, I've been waiting on a good sale for this game, as the regular price on Steam is $49.99 US. It finally went 60% off, so I was able to pick it up for $20, which I think makes sense for what this game has to offer. Andrew had never played this game either, so I figured we could have a shared experience with the game. The game has no online options, so we connected over Parsec and played for a couple hours. The game has 4 sports you can play: basketball, soccer, tennis, and golf. We played all 4. And overall, Andrew, both of us came away from the experience pleasantly surprised. If this game was released when I was a kid, I would have spent a ton of time on it with my family.
Yeah, and we grew up in an era where licensed games could be pretty hit or miss. You know, there's a lot of games back in the day, you know, some good licensed games, obviously, but there's a lot of games where the developers were like, well, certainly the studio was like, you know what, here's a property, a licensed property, you know, be happy with what you've got. A very rough game that's carried by the familiar characters. And this is not that. Like you said, a bit overpriced at the regular retail price. Should be a little bit lower. The current price, ideal for what it is. But, yeah, very solid across the board. Very mechanically solid for 4 different sports. They did a pretty good job with that.
It's also worth noting that you can get this game for pretty cheap in physical form online. I've seen it for $10, $15, $20, etc. So if you want to buy this game for the console for cheap, you should be able to find it. There's also digital downloads that are pretty inexpensive as well on both PlayStation and Xbox for under $20. But I wanted to get it for Steam, so I did, and I got it while it was on sale. I also want to point out, before we get into this review, that one of my favorite games growing up was Tiny Toon Adventures ACME All-Stars on Sega Genesis. But that game only had basketball and soccer. But 99.9% of my time with that game as a child was on the basketball portion of the game because that's the sport that I loved. But the soccer is sound on that game as well. I do want to point out that the basketball on Tiny Toon's Adventures ACME All-Stars is better than what Looney Tunes Wacky World of Sports has to offer. But you'll hear more about that later in the review. So let's talk about what Looney Tunes Wacky World of Sports has to offer. First off, the game supports up to 4 players locally for co-op, head-to-head, or solo versus the CPU. Most of the well-known Looney Tunes characters are included here. The character lineup is Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Lola Bunny, Porky Pig, Elmer Fudd, Sylvester, Tasmanian Devil, Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, and you can get Yosemite Sam via DLC. And from what I can tell, that's the only DLC that exists for this game is the Yosemite Sam pack. Granny and Witch Hazel also appear in the soccer portion of the game as goalkeepers, and then non-playable characters that you can see kind of throughout the game. Sometimes they're in the crowd, during the basketball game. They're in the stadium, etc. Foghorn Leghorn. I wish he was a playable character, Andrew, because I would love to use him in the basketball portion as a big man, but he's not a playable character, unfortunately.
You mean, I say, I wish you were playable, son.
That was actually pretty good. That was pretty good.
Thank you.
Hector the Bulldog, Babbitt and Catsello, Instant Martians, Gossamer, Dragon from Nighty Night Bugs, Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog, and they actually talk between quarters. Sometimes when you're playing the basketball portion of the game, Beaky Buzzard, Nasty Canasta, Marvin the Martian, K9, Tweety, who actually hosts the Ultimate Cup, so Tweety Bird hosts that, Charlie Dog, and the Fat Horse from What's Opera Dog. And yes, What's Opera. So in this game, unlockables primarily consist of in-game achievements, new courts, and character-themed items. The base game does not feature unlockable characters or secret stages. Instead, it focuses on completing specific tasks, such as winning challenges and ultimate cups, to earn achievements and unlock visual gear and unlockable levels. It's important to note that there's the challenges mode, and then there's the ultimate cup. And those are the primary play modes outside of just like your quick matches and whatnot. So some of the unlockables are courts and stages. Completing specific challenges and cups, like the Ultimate Cup, will unlock access to alternate versions of stadiums and secret courts, such as the indoor basketball court at Granny's house. For unlockable gear and sports packs, you can acquire new equipment like basketballs, soccer balls, tennis rackets, and golf clubs, themed around specific bundles, such as the Wild West set or the Sweet Deal Candy set. There's in-game achievements and challenges. There are 20 specific challenges to beat for each of the 4 sports: tennis, basketball, golf, and soccer. Team-ups, you can unlock specific achievement trophies by teaming up certain characters together. For example, like winning an event with Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. So there's still a lot to do in this game. There's a lot to unlock. I'm not a fan of how limited it is when you first boot up the basketball portion of the game. You only have Porky's Barn that you can play in, so just one stadium or barn, you could say, Andrew. So I'm not really a big fan of that. So let's get to the Ultimate Cup, which Andrew and I played together. The cup features the 4 sports, but you are competing against other Looney Tunes. The total number of competitors is 4. And they're all competing to win it all. Tweety Bird is the host of the tournament, as I mentioned earlier. He announces each event, and the event order is randomized. Our cup adventure started with tennis, where Andrew and I were placed on the same doubles team. I was using Porky Pig. He was using Daffy Duck. We won the match. The tennis is surprisingly fun. Far more fun playing doubles, though, as the side-to-side movement in the game is kind of clunky, making it hard to cover as much of the court as you need to in singles. As in all sports, you have a meter that fills up depending on how well you are doing, which grants you a special ability. In tennis, you can utilize this to hit the ball extra hard. In basketball, you can do it to execute a special dunk. In golf, it allows you to hit the ball extra hard. Those are just some examples. But Andrew, yeah, we started off with tennis, surprisingly fun. We both had to cover our sides of the court. And at times when they were being unpredictable, we had to kind of switch sides, or, you had to come up to the net and I had to stay at the baseline, or vice versa. We had to be strategic on where we were placing our shots to win points. So hitting in between our 2 opponents or hitting it down the line and whatnot. I was pleasantly surprised with the doubles tennis in this game. And I can see that being a lot of fun for families that have 4 people on the sticks where they all control a character.
Absolutely. Kind of like Wii Sports back in the day. Huge hit. Glancing at some of the reviews online, I've seen a lot of people seem to like tennis the best along with golf, and we'll certainly get into golf shortly. But yeah, very solid tennis mechanics. You've played more tennis games than I have, but I've also played a couple of them growing up, going back to tennis on the Intellivision, actually. Very old game there. But yeah, very mechanically solid. And you can get some pretty exciting rallies going. We had a pretty long one with the CPU, and we prevailed, and had a bit of a comeback victory, actually. And that was exciting. Getting to juice, getting the advantage, and then winning. Yeah, pretty solid tennis game.
Yeah, the AI is competent. Right. We noticed that in the golf portion of the game, in the tennis portion, when I play against the CPU on the higher levels, in the basketball portion when I'm playing them solo. We'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, the AI is surprisingly solid in this game, and it makes winning a tennis match pretty rewarding. And in that long point you were talking about, that's the point where I returned the serve. You were originally at net. You realized that you needed to back up a little bit, but they were being pretty unpredictable. And then I went in for a slam at the net, and then I ended up having to go back out to the baseline. And then we were both playing from the baseline, and I think I ended up winning the point by shooting it down the line and getting it behind one of our opponents. But that was a long, rewarding point. And that's pretty cool for a game like this that has 4 sports in it. The second event we played in was soccer, which I think is the most fun and the strongest sport mechanically in the game. Granny was my goalie, so I feel I was already at a disadvantage against Andrew, who had Witch Hazel in between the posts. In this challenge, they put Andrew with 2 Looney Tunes versus me with 2 Looney Tunes. Granny seems a little bit slower. Maybe it's just me. Maybe because she's a grandmother, right? Maybe I was just thinking that and she wasn't actually slower. But she's also not as big as Witch Hazel. So I felt like my goal was more open, Andrew. But I did win that game, so I was happy about that. The soccer is fast, fun, and strategy is important. Making smart passes and knowing when to shoot is key. You can do quick 1-2 punch goals where you pass it to a teammate and he immediately kicks it towards the goal. Think one-timers in hockey. You can also kick it hard at the goalie, which will knock them off balance during the saving process. And while the goalie is recovering, you can try to take a second shot to score. You need to be careful when trying to slide to intercept the ball as well, because if you time it wrong, your player is now out of position, etc. I find the soccer in this game to be incredibly fun and rewarding, and I think the soccer game itself is good enough to stand on its own as its own release. That's how strong I think that is. I'd love to play it a little bit more. Maybe you and I can connect on it again, but out of the 4 sports in the game, soccer, in my opinion, is the most well done.
I agree. I absolutely agree that it could be a standalone game. And while it is a bit stronger than the other sports, yeah, once again, they are all pretty well done. And this is a game where it would be very easy to half-ass it, quite frankly, with any of the sports, or all of the sports. Again, just saying, here's the Looney Tunes, playing sports, here's a tournament mode, it's good enough. I think they've put some genuine effort into it. And yeah, the soccer portion, a lot of fun. The evasive moves, pretty effective, but at the same time, not overpowering. Not having to worry about controlling the goalkeeper simplifies things. I think that makes it pretty good for a younger audience as well. And myself, I do know soccer. I have watched soccer before, but it's not my sport of choice. Strategically, I'm not the most knowledgeable about it, certainly not as experienced on the sticks when it comes to soccer games. But yeah, definitely a lot of fun. And as you've touched on, the teams are randomized. The ACME boxes come down on top of the characters, move around like a shell game, and randomize the teams with each contest. Obviously, golf, solo sport, but for the 3-team sports, the teams are randomized. And on one hand, it would be nice to play together for all 3 of the sports games, but I think that does change it up in a very interesting way. And if we did have the 4 players, everyone gets to play with everyone else. So that's a good approach.
Yeah, it kind of makes for a good party game, right? I also want to point out that I am more well-versed in tennis, soccer, and golf than Andrew, probably from a real-life perspective and from a video game perspective. Right. So tennis has always been like my second sport, as the one that I follow most outside of basketball. I also played it a bit when I was younger. Soccer, my girlfriend plays, and I go to her games and we watch it sometimes. And I grew up playing some of the soccer games as well, Super Soccer, some of the old FIFA games and whatnot. And golf, I've played games kind of like this, like cartoony golf games like Hot Shots Golf and whatnot. But the point I'm making here is that even for you who are not as familiar with those sports, you're not as drawn to those sports, you're not used to playing video games related to those sports, it would still pick up and play for you. Right. And you were talking to me in the Discord chat and you were like, basically stating, yeah, you were having a good time, right? Playing sports that you're really not that interested in, but the game's mechanics made it welcoming. And I think that's the sign of a really good pick up and play game.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of golf games do have similar mechanics. Remember playing Microsoft Golf for PC back in the day. Very similar, pretty much the same swing system in pretty much every golf game that I've played. Probably the golf game that I played the most of growing up, a PC game as well, Fuzzy's World of Miniature Space Golf. But of course that's putt-putt, mini-putt, so that is a bit different, far more simple mechanics, played with a mouse as well. But yeah, obviously it helps that I have some familiarity with those sports, with those games growing up, but absolutely pick up and play. And again, because this game is aimed at that younger audience, you really need that. I mean, it's great for us as well, but if you're going to give this to kids, if you're going to make this a family game, like you say, a great party game, it really does need to be simple, pick up and play, and satisfying. And of course, there are some moments here and there where there's a bit of frustration. If nothing else, you're competing, you're feeling competitive, so when you mess up, it does get a bit annoying, but it's not oh, I don't want to play this game anymore. I think there's just the right amount of challenge.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that outside of the golf portion, when you're playing it in the Ultimate Cup, the games do go by pretty fast, right? It's not like a slog or anything like that. If you're not having that much fun, the game will be over soon. So let's get to the golf portion. That was the third event we played in the Ultimate Cup. It works well. They overdid it, though, with the number of holes you were required to play when competing in the Ultimate Cup. While the tennis match, the basketball game, and the soccer match took probably 8 to 10 minutes to complete each event individually, I believe golf took over 30 minutes for us to complete, as they force you to play 9 holes, mostly made up of par 4s and par 5s. The golf itself is simple and fun, with mechanics that make sense and a skill gap that exists and strategy that is important. You know, you choose how much power you want to put into the shot. The next piece is your accuracy, and it's important where you place the ball on the green. There's obviously hills and slopes depending on which course you're on and where you are on the course. You can hit the ball into the rough. You can hit it into a sand trap. I got royally screwed over when I was in the thick of it and competing with the AI opponents when I took a special shot with more power, aiming for the green, and I hit a windmill, Andrew. And I ended up having to retake that shot. So you want to dodge the windmills, you want to dodge the trees, all of that. The golf is really solid. And again, they could have half-weighed this, right? And probably got away with it. But they put a lot of thought into it. And while it's simple, it works.
And obviously some great design work going into the courses as well. Looking fantastic, providing those obstacles. Absolutely. And I agree. You know, we were joking about it in our chat, how long it was taking, as much as we were enjoying it. They really could have made that 3 holes, I think. It does stick out like a sore thumb just how long the golf portion is, considering how short the other sports are. So I was a bit surprised. I said to you, somebody on the development team is a really big fan of golf. The developers must be really big fans of golf to make this the main event of the game, although it was the third event in our Ultimate Cup. So actually basketball was the main event, which is kind of appropriate for us, I suppose. But yeah, if there's a drawback to the golf, it is that it goes on just that little bit too long. And to be honest, that is a bit of a drawback as far as it being a party game. I can see younger gamers getting a bit frustrated here. Certainly we were saying in our chat, how long is this going to go? And I looked it up and saw the 9 holes and kind of groaned when I saw that. As fun as it is, as well designed as it is, I do think it should be a bit shorter.
Yeah, and I do believe you can play like a one-off golf challenge with less holes. Like you can choose the number of holes that you play. So that's good. But the Ultimate Cup being 9 holes, that was just too much. And I don't know if there's a way to fix that, if you can, lower the number of holes that are in the Ultimate Cup challenges and whatnot. But if there isn't, I wish that could be patched in. I know that's not going to happen now. But yeah, that was probably the biggest downer of competing in the Ultimate Cup. I do want to point out, though, you mentioned how great the courses look and how great everything looks as it relates to the golf portion of the game. I just think the presentation of the game overall is really sharp. I think the graphics look great. I think the voices for all the characters sound awesome. I think that there's a lot of personality with the game, whether it's doing your special dunk and, them saying a line from the cartoon and acting it out and all of that stuff, and the celebrations and the humor and all of that stuff. I find the game to be very strong from a presentation standpoint, and it screams Looney Tunes. So that's a plus.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely nailed that. And as I said to you in our chat, getting that 2D style of animation and successfully translating it to 3D while keeping that cel-shaded look, keeping that classic Looney Tunes look, very well done. And getting the characters. They've obviously got all the voice actors. I mentioned they've got Kath Soucie doing Lola Bunny. She originated the character in Space Jam. A couple of other people have done it, I believe. Kristen Wiig in the Looney Tunes show circa 2011. So it's kind of nice to hear Kath Soucie doing her voice, her original Lola Bunny voice. And yeah, just really appealing visuals. It is nice that they have that banter in between quarters and so forth. It can get a bit repetitive, I suppose, but at the same time, it makes you smile. So I'm all for it.
Lastly, we played a game of basketball. It was the final event in the Ultimate Cup. It's important to note that when you're playing outside of the Ultimate Cup, when you're playing a basketball game like a one-off, you can play 1, 2, or 3-minute quarters, with the sweet spot being 2-minute quarters, in my opinion. But for the Cup, they had us play 1-minute quarters. There are no dribble moves in this game, but some strategy is involved in order to give you the edge. You can throw pies and dynamite, send anvils down from the sky to crush your opponents, and more. The special item options appear to be completely random, and that is fine. It felt good to hit Daffy Duck in the face with a pie and bury a 3 on the other end while he was recovering. Andrew thought he had an open shot, but I blew him up with some dynamite, which naturally jarred the ball loose, and I headed the other way. In order to trigger the special item, you just need to hit LB. Think Xbox controller. Mechanically, the basketball portion of this game is the roughest, as the shooting and dunking animations are very slow. It's not very enjoyable to shoot or dunk in this game, and steals are overpowering on or off ball, making most any pass feels risky, which is the opposite of NBA Bounce, where the shooting, passing, and dunking are all sound mechanically and overall rewarding. Blocking shots can be too easy at times as well because of the long windup when players shoot. You also can't block dunks or knock people out of the air when they go up. And lobs don't work when playing co-op with another human. They only work when playing with a CPU teammate. However, both Andrew and I agree that overall, the basketball portion of the game is pick up and play, and we both believe that all 4 of the sports and how they function in the game would appeal to kids.
And I think that's the most important part, because this is aimed at a younger audience, at family party play. People who aren't as into all of these sports, perhaps, they just want that fun pick up and play experience, that party experience, and it does work for that. It's not the best basketball game that we've played, obviously. At the same time, compare it to, and this is kind of the standard for shovelware basketball games, but kid sports basketball. Again, aimed at that younger audience, but it could have been so much better. It's very much shovelware. This is not shovelware. The basketball mechanics, as you said, the roughest of all the sports. Unfortunately for us, being such huge hoop heads as we are, but still very playable. You do have too many turnovers. It is a bit too easy to block shots. There is that delay. But at the same time, it's fun. You pull off the special moves, the free throw line dunks. Every character has that signature move that's totally in character for their characters. Very well animated. Does it get a bit repetitive? Sure, but that's arcade basketball sometimes. You are going to see some of the same moves over and over again, and they are exciting. It's always novel to see them pull off those moves. Balance could be better. Defense, very hard to play, as you said. But I still had fun. I would play it again. And I think at the end of the day, if you can say that, I want to play this again. I'm not one and done. I'm open to playing it again. That means it's pretty solid. And this was.
Yeah, each one of the sports is a simple representation of that sport in this game. And that's fine because the game is designed for children overall, and it's supposed to be pick up and play. For example, in the tennis portion, you can't dive to hit a shot, right? You're basically just kind of running back and forth, hitting the ball, but there's no advanced mechanics to that. In the soccer game, I didn't see any corner kicks. I didn't see that as being an option in the game. It's supposed to be a very simple game of soccer. I'd say overall, though, that golf and soccer in the game have the most depth. But again, you're not getting something like for the soccer portion, you're not getting all the rules of FIFA, right? And for the tennis portion, you're not getting all the rules and strategy that would go with like a top spin. But for the audience this game is intended for 4 sports in one game at that price and whatnot, yeah, I think it does well. So I'm going to give my final score for this game. I think this game is great for families. It's great for parents who want to play with their kids, and excellent for young children to play with their friends. Maybe play it while having a sleepover on the weekends. Maybe while pulling an all-nighter if the parents allow. Like NBA Bounce, this gameplay is accessible for all ages. As a result, that elevates the review score. However, due to no online options, the score takes a minor hit. Why only minor? Because of the target audience for this game. I give this game a solid 7 out of 10. What about you, Andrew?
I was thinking 7 out of 10 as well, because it is so confidently done across the board. As I said at the beginning of the show, we grew up with some licensed games where they were definitely trying to coast on the license. The mechanics were bad, the gameplay loop was repetitive and not very fun to repeat over and over again, very rushed, not mechanically sound. You know the game I'm going to bring up here, Derek, Bart vs. the Space Mutants, how easy it is to take that popular property, slap it on a very mediocre game at best, or a rather bad game with Bart vs. the Space Mutants, obviously, and call it a day. Just chuck it out there to the kids, they won't know the difference. They just see the licensed property, great. There's a lot more care has gone into this, and the fact that there is 4 different sports, all done pretty well, all enjoyable enough in their own right, I think is very commendable. So I'm going to say 7 out of 10 as well. And on one hand, that does feel kind of harsh, being that it is a kid's game, and I'm all about scoring games relative to what they are, what they're supposed to be, who they're aimed at, etc. But at the same time, you don't give games a pass just because they're aimed at a younger audience. Just like movies, just like TV shows, you don't have to half-ass it just because it's for a younger audience. And I don't think this does. Is it the best representation of all of these sports? Obviously, I'm not looking at it from a sim aspect, but simply a mechanical aspect, a fun aspect. Is it the best representation of all of these sports in that arcade kid style? I mean, it's up there. Again, they're all pretty well done. They're all enjoyable. The golf portion did take too long. That really was a strange decision, but it is a fun game. Once again, I have to agree with you. The price, a little bit steep for what it is. Currently, it's on sale for $20 US, about $28 Australian. The deluxe edition, $34. If you want to get Yosemite Sam into the game and playable, not too bad. You know, that's a good price for this game. At the usual price, a little bit overpriced, kind of like NBA Bounce at launch. I know it's an expensive license. I know there's a lot of work has gone into this game, but for the quality of the game, for the depth of the game, can't really charge more than that. But for that price, pretty good. So yeah, I'm going to say 7 out of 10 as well. I would recommend it for younger gamers, for families, and certainly the evergreen popularity of Looney Tunes. Yeah, thumbs up here.
I do want to say to those who end up picking up the game, if you want the best shot blocker for the basketball portion, grab Tasmanian Devil. He's like Ben Wallace out there, Andrew. He is the best shot blocker in the game. And not only that, he's pretty darn good at steals too. The best shooter in the game, from my experience using a bunch of the different characters, the one with the shot that's easiest to shoot, I would say is probably Porky Pig. I put a video out there on Twitter stating that Porky Pig was a combination of Michael Jordan and Steph Curry. Maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, maybe more like Steph Curry than Michael Jordan. But in that video, you will see me just hitting threes from all over the place with Porky Pig. He's also excellent at getting steals. So just a couple tips there.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, me-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
Before we get into this week's responses to the community question, which asked, what is your favorite cartoon-related sports game of all time? I wanted to touch on Tiny Toon Adventures ACME All-Stars for Sega Genesis. You had never played this game before, so we connected over Parsec, and I talk about this game a lot because it was my favorite cartoon-related sports game growing up. And like I stated earlier in the show, this game had basketball and soccer. Most of my time was spent on the basketball portion of it. It has all your favorite and some of your not so favorite, like Elmira, Tiny Toons characters, to use in the game. So you got Little Beeper and Furball and Plucky Duck and Dizzy Devil and Hampton Pig and Babs Bunny, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Calamity Coyote, they're all there to use. And they all have their own special abilities in the game. For example, Montana Max, who's one of my favorite players to use, you jump in a car and you can mow down other players and you can shoot from the car and hit threes with him, etc. Hampton Pig, he turns into a ball and you bounce around with him and he ends up going towards the hoop and going in the hoop. If you bounce with him from the 3-point line and you land his body inside the hoop, it's counted as a 3-pointer. Little Beeper turns on the Jets, right? He has a special ability that makes him faster and you can beat everybody down the court. So special abilities for each individual player, which is really cool. This game also has tip dunks, right? You see a ball come off the rim, you time your jump right, and you can tip dunk it. It has jump passing. You can knock players who are going up out of the air. You can snatch block from players. You can get snatch steals, which is also in the Looney Tunes game as well. But I just think this game has so much depth on the basketball portion. And I'm hoping, we haven't talked about this, but I'm hoping that you also feel that way and that you were pleasantly surprised by that game as well.
Oh, I was. And again, this is from the time where a lot of licensed games weren't that great. They were banking on the license heavily. I can see why this is such a nostalgic favorite for you. You know, once I got used to the controls, I didn't grow up playing Sega Genesis, so I didn't play this game. Didn't actually play a lot of cartoony sports games growing up. I must admit, NBA Jam Tournament Edition, probably the most cartoony it got for me, actually. Either that or the basketball minigame in the Flintstones, The Rescue of Dino and Hoppy. Not really a sports game, does have that minigame for bonuses in between levels as a platformer. But yeah, this was fun. Once I got accustomed to controls, you gave me a few tips as well. Yeah, definitely a lot of fun. We had a great comeback victory in that session. Kind of reminded me of some of our other comeback victories in more serious sports games, Derek. It doesn't matter. If it's basketball, we want to win. So we did not give up. We had that great comeback victory. You know, trying to use those special abilities to the best of your ability, not just a matter of pressing the button and letting it go. As you pointed out to me in our chat, definitely strategy to that game. Definitely well done. For the 16-bit era, very nice graphically as well, capturing the animation style. No, I definitely had a good time. I can see what's a favorite.
And for that comeback that Andrew mentioned, I posted that entire quarter on Twitter and on Discord. We were down 30-17 going into the fourth, and the quarters go by pretty fast, but we made a ferocious comeback, went on a 20-6 run and won that game 37-36, so a 1-point win. And yeah, it took great defense. It took hitting some clutch threes using Dizzy Devil's special ability where he turns into a tornado, can't get stolen from, and you can fire it from three with him. Yeah, I just love the strategy behind that game. I love the art style. I love the music. I love the sound effects. I'm just a big fan of the basketball portion of Tiny Toon Adventures, ACME All-Stars. But Andrew, real quick, what would you say is your favorite cartoon-related sports game of all time?
Yeah, it's tough because, as I said, didn't play a lot of them growing up. A lot of them I've played years later, retroactively. I might have to say, simply for how much I love the film Space Jam. Also the fact that it's one of the few games in the late 90s there that actually had Michael Jordan in it. You know, the basketball is fairly decent, kind of an NBA Jam clone, obviously. No surprise there. Once again, art style is great. Really captured the animation style of the Looney Tunes, circa Space Jam. And of course, you have the interesting wrinkle of the mini-games in between that kind of pad out the story, pad out the game, and mimic scenes from the movie. The problem is, it's pretty shallow. You know, there's only one opponent, obviously, the Monstars. You can change it up with the different Looney Tunes that you control, and you can even not select Michael Jordan, I believe, although why he'd ever do that, I don't know. Again, the only game in the late 90s that he was actually playable in, at least until NBA Live 2000, 1999, late 90s, obviously. But yeah, as somebody who didn't play that many cartoony sports games growing up, apart from NBA Jam, of course, might have to go to Space Jam by default.
I just wish that Space Jam had more depth.
Yeah.
I had it for PlayStation as well, and we did play it a lot at the beginning, the first week or two that we had it, but then it just got old. and repetitive. There's not a lot of depth to that gameplay. There's no dribble moves. It's basically kind of just like running up and down the court and passing, shooting, and dunking, and that is about it. So there's just a lack of overall staying power. However, I will say that the graphics are well done overall. The character likenesses are great. Sound effects, great. The Monstars look awesome. Yeah, I had that game, and I still like it. I just think it lacks depth. So my favorite cartoon-related sports game of all time, not including kart racing, is Tiny Toons ACME All-Stars for Sega Genesis, which we just talked about. That takes the top spot. Followed by Looney Tunes B-Ball for Super Nintendo, and Space Jam for PS1, because it holds a special place in my heart. For kart games, the original Super Mario Kart will always be my sentimental favorite, and Mario Kart Double Dash for GameCube is my second favorite Mario Kart game. Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix might be my favorite kart racing game of all time, with Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 Slime Speedway not being far behind. I was a huge Nickelodeon kid growing up. Big Ren and Stimpy fan. Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 allows me to use him, same as Kart Racers 3. I think overall, Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix was better optimized. Overall, had more fun courses, and I enjoyed that game a little bit more. But Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 had the voices of the Nickelodeon characters and whatnot. So Ren saying some of his lines, sometimes in the wrong voice, because I think they used a different person for some of the lines that he used to say and whatnot. But yeah, you got real voices in Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 Slime Speedway for the characters. But yeah, I think that there's definitely a place for these cartoon-related sports games, mostly with kids. But yeah, as an adult, as we experience today, I can still enjoy them.
I mean, if we're going to bring kart racing into it, Garfield Kart. I mean, is there a more life-changing game? As we've said before.
The GOAT.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But all jokes aside, pretty solid game, right? Once again, they could have done a lot worse with that property, but they did make a pretty solid kart racing game. Yeah, Looney Tunes B-Ball, I have played. Didn't play it back in the day. Couldn't get my hands on it. And trying to get my hands on it now, for collection purposes, actually very rare to see that pop up on eBay here in Australia. Very expensive when it does. A bit more than I'm willing to pay, actually, especially when it's not complete in box. And even then, I would rather just get that loose cart and not pay hundreds of dollars for a kind of a rare game, I guess, around these parts. But yeah, very hard to get hold of. Pretty solid NBA Jam clone. Looney Tunes B-Ball. I know that was pretty popular back in the day. Of course, I love Mario Kart as well. Didn't know if that counted as a cartoon game, but if it does, absolutely put that up there as well. That would probably be my favorite, I suppose, either Super Mario Kart or Mario Kart 64. Played a lot of Mario Kart 64 when I got my Nintendo 64 back in the day. You mentioned Nickelodeon. There is a game, Nicktoons Basketball, which has the Nickelodeon characters. Unfortunately for us, Derek, it is a younger millennials game. It's the SpongeBob era. It has Tommy Pickles, but it's the all-grown-up version, the spin-off they did in the early 2000s, not the original Rugrats version, although that would be pretty tough to have him dribbling around on the basketball court. Different kind of dribbling the original Tommy Pickles did back in the day. But yeah, pretty solid. We'll have to try and connect on that sometime. I do have that one in the collection for PC, but unfortunately for us, elder millennials, Millennial Prime, if you will, doesn't have those early 90s Nickelodeon characters like your Ren and Stimpy, etc. It's the SpongeBob era onwards, basically. But yeah, that is an interesting game as well.
So yeah, the Nicktoons that I fell in love with and the ones that I grew up with were, Doug and Rugrats and the Ren and Stimpy show, with Ren and Stimpy being my favorite. Those were the original three. And then I really liked Rocko's Modern Life when that became a Nicktoon. Real Monsters was decent. Hey Arnold, The Angry Beavers. But then after that, obviously, I wasn't watching any Nicktoons anymore. But I was a Nickelodeon kid growing up. So let's get to this week's community responses to this week's community question, where I asked, what is your favorite cartoon-related sports game of all time? On Twitter, Josh at SportsGaming24 states, I have the most nostalgia for this one. And he shows the PlayStation disc holder for Space Jam.
Yeah, like we said, not the deepest game, obviously. The replay value pretty limited. But once again, for a licensed property in the 90s, where it definitely could have been a lot worse, yeah, I think that's a pretty solid game. I'm glad I was able to pick it up, managed to get the PS1 version, been looking out for a cheap version of the PC release as well. Haven't been able to find one at a good price yet. But yeah, that was fun to play all these years later.
A couple of comments on my Porky Pig highlights. Royce at Royce Brink 14 states, so glad to see you're playing this game. I thought that the basketball portion of this game was better than the others. I still have a soft spot for the Looney Tunes. I remember Looney Tunes B-Ball on the Super NES, and at first wanted the game to play like that. Hashtag respect. So he was fond of Looney Tunes B-Ball, but it looks like he warmed up to Looney Tunes Wacky World of Sports basketball and really enjoyed that. Shiloh at Nano Ninja states, I had the original game back in the day, and he shows the Super Nintendo box for Looney Tunes basketball. That's the one that people talk about the most, and I will admit the gameplay is very solid on that one.
And there was definitely a bit of a crossover with Looney Tunes and basketball in the 90s, even before Space Jam. There were a couple of McDonald's ads with Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan. So the Looney Tunes were definitely having a bit of a resurgence in the 90s. Basketball obviously exploding in popularity worldwide. So looking back, it only made sense that it culminated with Space Jam.
Yeah, I'd like to say that overall, I think that the gameplay on Looney Tunes B-Ball and Tiny Toons ACME All-Stars is better for the basketball portion than Looney Tunes Wacky World of Sports. But, like I stated, it's still okay, and it's still pick up and play. Moving over to Discord, some of the other responses. QB1120 states, for nostalgia, I'd say Looney Tunes B-Ball, because I'd rent that from Blockbuster and play co-op with my cousins. I don't know if this counts, but Technos, the creator of River City Ransom, has a basketball game that has weapons and fighting on the Famicom that's really fun. There's also multiple baskets on each side, like how MTV did in the Rock and Jock B-Ball Jam specials. They did. I still haven't looked up that game. He's mentioned that game before. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I have to check it out.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one either. It does sound pretty interesting, to say the least. And that was the situation back in the day where we did have regional exclusives for basketball games. And there were quite a few, not just the NBA games that couldn't be licensed internationally, although they are obviously examples, but games like that that only came out in Japan or Europe or North America, whatever. Obviously, with the universal adapters, emulation these days, we can get our hands on these games and take a look at them. So yeah, we need to look into that one, because Q has mentioned that one before, and definitely sounds interesting.
Maz states, Space Jam solely because it gave me one of my favorite Game Grumps videos of all time. I'm not familiar with Game Grumps, but I know that you're familiar with it.
Yeah, reviews, let's plays, commentary, etc. Haven't actually seen that one. I'll have to look it up and see what they had to say about it. But those guys definitely are entertaining. So yeah, probably will enjoy that when I do.
The X, also on Twitter at Andrew the X, states, it's got to be Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympics, namely the 2010 Vancouver edition. I think this lends well to cartoon characters since they have no athlete licenses and makes it more interesting and gave the developers more creative license. The cartoon characters also have their strengths and weaknesses. Example, Sonic's speed, Mario's all around, Bowser's power. He states, I prefer the winter games than summer games as less button mashing, and the sports are a bit more interesting and varied. So, before I throw it over to you, that makes me think of a game with a similar name to this Looney Tunes game that we were just discussing. Tiny Toon Adventures Wacky Sports Challenge for Super Nintendo. We played the hell out of that game. This game made our hands hurt. It made our fingers hurt, our wrists hurt. The amount of button mashing to win these events, Andrew, or at least most of the events, was insane, especially events like weightlifting. But the game had 12 Olympic-style events related to track and field challenges, action and wacky land events like ice cream throw, chicken dash, ski race, tractor running. It had bungee jumping, log chopping, etc. But I can't even tell you the pain playing this game, but it was so addicting to try to win all the events and compete against one another. Like I stated, I have two brothers. We would always play this game. What a fun game. So I see where he's coming from with the Olympic style games, because that was one of my favorites.
And they do make for great party games, to your earlier point. And it is commendable when developers can get that right. Because as we've seen over the years, just getting one sport right can be a challenge. So to have an array of events that is well designed, that is at the very least fun to play, is definitely an achievement. Reminds me a lot of California Games back in the day. Played California Games 2 on PC a fair bit in the late 90s. A friend of mine had it in his collection. We all ended up sharing that game, playing that game a lot in the late 90s. It was already at least a few years old at that point, California Games 2, but mastering all of the events, the skateboarding, the snowboarding, etc. Again, all pretty well done in that game. And it is nice when all the events in these multi-event games are fun enough, are well-designed enough that you can have that tournament. So yeah, that is pretty cool. And another Sonic game that I've played is Sonic Team Racing, another kart game. That was pretty well done as well. Now, is it Garfield kart? Nothing can be. But yeah, another pretty solid kart racing game there. And of course, appropriate that it's an alternative to Mario Kart, being Sonic.
Yeah, I just want to say to close the show, I love any game that brings families together, that brings people together, that allows people to create memories at home. And I think that, games like NBA Bounce and party games that have multiple events, like Looney Tunes, Wacky World of Sports, et cetera. I think that those games can create a lot of memories at home. And I think that these are the type of games that parents should seek out to, get their kids and share with their kids and, make memories with their kids. So yeah, I like this game overall, and I'm glad that I picked it up.
For sure. And though we do gravitate towards the sim titles, the arcade titles, the AAA releases, the NBA-oriented releases, there's still a market for this, an audience for this. They're definitely great games to give to those younger gamers, to introduce them to basketball and these other sports. And as they get a bit older, maybe they'll gravitate towards those more serious games. And of course, NBA Jam, NBA Street, NBA The Run, not a serious take on basketball, but a bit more so than the cartoony style of Looney Tunes, Wacky World of Sports, and other such games. But that and NBA Bounce, definitely great ways to get younger gamers into the sport. Again, way better than shovelware like Kids Sports Basketball. Younger gamers still deserve quality, just as younger viewers deserve quality shows, quality movies. Just because it is that younger audience doesn't mean that you don't put effort into these properties. And a couple of quick responses from threads. Dabbling Daisy 69 says, Tiny Toon Adventures, ACME All-Stars. So yeah, you're definitely not the only person to have nostalgia for that game, Derek.
Yeah, I recommend people that haven't played that to try to get their hands on it, because I think it's underrated. And you have about 5 or 6 different courts that you can play on, with just the default purchase of the game. I mean, it's Sega Genesis. There was no DLC back then, Andrew. But, there's different places you can play. I think there's a lot of depth to the gameplay. I think it can be challenging, and I think it can be fun versus the CPU or against another human, or playing it on the same team as another human against the CPU. And the soccer portion of the game is underrated. It plays a pretty good game of soccer as well.
And in a similar vein, Nostalgic Bit Gaming says, Buster Bust Loose football level needs a mention, LOL. And of course that is a platform game. But yeah, sports obviously did show up in other games, in other genres. There's the ability to shoot around, play basketball in GTA San Andreas, obviously. And as I said, with the Flintstones, the Rescue of Dino and Hoppy for NES, you have a basketball minigame in between the platforming levels. So that was very interesting back in the day. Pelicans as the baskets. This is the Flintstones, of course, Derek. But yeah, you did see sports show up as minigames, even in platform games. So yeah, a lot of memories there.
Did you ever play Mario Tennis?
No, I didn't play that one.
Solid. Pretty good gameplay. Good party game. I remember playing that with multiple people at the same time. So that's another good cartoon-related sports game that I recommend.
And I suppose to close here, Derek, once again, as seriously as we take basketball and other sports games, they don't always have to be super serious, especially for that younger audience. And these games, definitely a great way to introduce younger gamers to these sports, introduce them to the rules, bit more casual, bit easier, not as in-depth. And then if they get hooked on the sport, yeah, look towards those more in-depth titles.
And look at Andrew the X. He ended up picking up NBA Bounce after listening to a show where we briefly touched on it. And he's been having fun with his kids with that game, whether it be, in party mode or otherwise. And that's what we want to hear. That's really cool. He's using the create a player feature. They're creating themselves and putting themselves in the game. They're having laughs. They're having fun. That's just awesome. And that's the thing that I love to see the most.
So thank you to everybody who responded to Derek's community question. As always, great to have you as part of the conversation, and please keep the conversation going. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder you can catch us every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms. Also, both we and the NLSC are on social media, and would appreciate a follow. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D for3G and at D for384. I'm also on YouTube, D for3, and on the NLSC, D for3.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
That's all, folks.